live meeting, please. Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Governance Committee meeting of 15th of March 2021. Welcome to members of the press and public watching this meeting live. I'm Councillor Richard Burrett, Chair of the Governance Committee. This is a meeting being held in public and not a public meeting. There will be no public question time at any council meeting while virtual committee meetings are being held. The public and press can still hear and see the meeting, but public speaking has been suspended, and any written questions submitted in advance that were deemed acceptable by the Council's monitoring officer will be read out and answered. There will be no supplementary questions. The agenda for this meeting is published and available on the Council's website. For any committee meeting held virtually, all voting will be held via a recorded vote taken by a Democratic Services team member on behalf of the Chair, whereby individual councillors will be asked at the end of the debate to state if they are for, against, or if they wish to abstain on the recommendation before them at that time. The exceptions to this are the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting or any other procedural item, or where the item's sole recommendation to a committee is to note the report. For those items, the Chair will move the item and it will be presumed agreed unless a dissenting comment from any committee member is made. Before I invite members of the committee to confirm their attendance, I ask that they please ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or on silent, their backgrounds are set to a generic office background, and they are aware of their surroundings so they are not disturbed during the meeting. This includes making sure all televisions, radios and smart speakers are switched off. Committee members are reminded that they should have their microphones turned off unless they are speaking, and their cameras turned off unless they're requesting to speak. When asked to speak, please turn your camera on, unmute yourselves, and pause for 3 seconds to allow for the slight time delay in connection. Please bear in mind that you are only live when your image is surrounded by a red box. With this in mind, committee members are asked to be aware of who they will follow in the voting process and to prepare accordingly. I will now ask the officers supporting this meeting to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Chris Pedlow, Democratic Services Manager. I'm supporting this meeting. There are 3 other officers on the call. Ms Matthews, Democratic Services Officer, Andrew Oakley, Elections Manager, and Natalie Balmer-Powell, the Chief Executive.
Thank you. We will now be taking committee member introductions together with items 1, 2 and 3. Please may I ask committee members, when called upon, to confirm their name and the ward they represent, if they have any declarations of interest to make, and if they agree with the minutes of the meeting of the Governance Committee held on 26th of January 2021.
Councillor Barrett, please confirm your declaration.
Yes, I'm Richard Burrett. I'm councillor for Pound Hill North and Forge Wood Ward. I have no declarations to make, and I agree with the minutes of the meeting of the Governance Committee held on the 26th of January.
Thank you. Councillor Crowe.
Good evening. I'm Duncan Crowe, councillor for Furness Green. I have no declarations of interest to declare, and I agree the minutes of the previous meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Eade.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Eade. I'm councillor for the Furness Green Ward. I have no declarations of interest to make, and I agree the meetings of the previous meeting.
Councillor Jones.
I'm Councillor Michael Jones. I'm councillor for Bewbush and Broadfield North. I have no declaration of interest to make, and I agree with the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Lamb.
Hello.
Councillor Lamb.
Councillor Peter Lamb, member for Northgate and West Green. I have no declarations of interest to declare, and I approve the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Lanza.
Good evening, Bob Lands, Crawley Borough Councillor for Pound Hill South and Worth Ward. I agree with the minutes of the last meeting and I have no declarations of interest. Thank you.
Councillor Lunnon.
Good evening, my name is Tim Lunnon. I'm the councillor for Broadfield Ward. I approve minutes of the previous meeting and I have no declarations of interest.
Councillor Malik.
Good evening, Councillor Shahzad Malik from Langley Green and Tashmore Ward. I have no declarations to make, but with regards to the minute, I have noted that the comments for and against both the options with regards to the allocation of chairs and vice chairs have been mentioned, but as I was the only one who opposed both the options and was in favor of the current system, I would have hoped that my comments were minuted as well for the record's sake. Thank you.
Councillor McCarthy.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kevin McArthur. I represent Pound Hill North and Forgewood. I have no declarations of interest and I agree with the minutes from the governance meeting 26th of January. Thank you.
Councillor Mullins, I'm trying to dial you in. Are you there? Chair, Councillor Mullins isn't there at the moment, so he's not in, but we'll keep trying. He does appear to be online, but we'll, if he comes in, we'll bring him in later. Over to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. The committee agrees that the minutes of the meeting of the Governance Committee held on 26th of January 2021 are an accurate record of the meeting, and I will sign those shortly. That then takes us on to item 4.
Chair, sorry, I did mention about my comments. Would I get an answer for that? Would they be minuted or not?
Well, you can propose an amendment to the minutes if you wish to do that. Although, having said that, I would take the view that those minutes did go through the full council meeting a few weeks ago, and you didn't make a comment at that point. So I would have hoped that in that situation it would have been raised then. But any member of the committee can move an amendment to the minutes if they wish, and that's up to them to do that if they wish to do it.
So can I move the amendment, as I've mentioned that I did made a comment which was different than all the other members that should be minuted? Can I propose that?
Well, you can propose that, and it would need a seconder. I've got Councillor Crowe indicating.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not coming into second, but I just point out that as you started now, I'm not coming into second the proposed amendment to the minutes, but we'll just point out that I think we end up going down a bit of a slippery slope if we start saying whose comments were recorded where and whatever, because everyone could. It's not meant to be like Hansard where comments are recorded verbatim. It is meant to be a summary of the meeting and the outcomes. So I tend to advise against having recorded additional comments into the meeting above and beyond what have already been put in the minutes.
Well, thank you for that comment. I mean, I would just make the comment that, our minutes have changed a bit over the years. I can remember a time when minutes were simply a précis of the report and then the resolution, and nothing was ever minuted about comments that have been made, but we don't tend to minute individual comments. But I've got Councillor Jones here. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think Councillor Malik is absolutely right that in terms of he's right to raise correction of minutes at this meeting rather than the full council, because this is where there can be an amendment. However, I'm not entirely 100% clear what the amendment would be, so it's very difficult for me to consider seconding it. And Councillor Malik propose what his amendment to the minutes would be.
May I, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, and thank you, Chair. Sorry, it's just basically that honourable members made their comments for or against both of the options that were given, and I was the only one who made comments against either of these and in favour of the current system. So I was suggesting that this, as I was the only one against these, that at least it should be minuted that there was somebody who was against these two options and in favor of the current system. So this is what I was proposing, that my just one sentence comment to be noted on these in these minutes, that Councillor Malik opposed both the options and spoke in favor of the current system. Thank you.
Okay, well, we are getting rather bogged down on this, and we have actually agreed the minutes. So, you know, if there is an amendment to be proposed, I think we need to it needs either a second or to fall, and we need to take a vote rather than spending.
Chair, may I try and assist? My understanding was that if an individual councillor was not in agreement with
Councillor Jones, you've gone into mute.
Apologies for that. Sorry, Chairman. My understanding was that they are able to put in the minutes that they do not agree with a particular decision and have that noted for the record. That being the case, would that be an acceptable minute to reflect Councillor Malik's concerns?
Yeah. Can I call in Chris Pedlow to clarify this?
Can I suggest, I think sort of what Councillor Jones was saying, that we just note it in the minutes for the that the minutes are approved subject, and that Councillor Malik asked that a comment be made that a member showed support to remain in the current system. So I think that would hopefully cover everything that needed for an amendment. The minutes are approved, but Councillor Malik asked that it be noted that a member should retain support for the current system. I think that ticks all the boxes. If Councillor Malik is happy, he should need a vote. Chair, is that acceptable for you?
Yes, if that's, you know, if that's what people want to do, but obviously we'll have to take a vote, won't we? Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, the difficulty with what Councillor Jones has just suggested is that has to be recorded at the time, and it wasn't. So therefore, it wouldn't be an accurate reflection of what happened at the meeting. So I've got difficulty with that in terms of accuracy. If Councillor Malik, you know, the minutes do state I think they state the numbers for and against. But the point is that if you wish that your vote be recorded at the time, you need to say so at the time, and doing it at the following meeting when the minutes are agreed isn't the way that it should be done. It's just about a procedure.
Chair.
You're muted.
Yeah, just in response to Councillor Crowe's point, of course, the minutes, because we're taking recorded votes on all items, the minutes do actually state who voted which way anyway. Although my understanding is this is about somebody making a dissenting comment rather than how they voted. So how do we proceed? We need a proposal and seconder if there's an amendment.
If I may, Chair, if I go back to the point, if Councillor Malik is happy that it's recorded in today's minutes that he wished that it noted that a member showed support for the remaining system, which is what he said in the last meeting, hopefully you don't need to vote. If Councillor Malik's happy, he can have his, it won't change a minute, but it'll record in this meeting that the point is made. Can I bring in Councillor Malik, please?
Yeah, Councillor Malik, would that be an acceptable way forward?
Yeah, sure. All I wanted was, Chair, was to be my comments basically recorded for the future. So whichever way they find it easier, I have no problem with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. Yes, so can I just reiterate, the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 26th of January have been agreed as an accurate record of the meeting, and I will sign those shortly. That takes us on to item 4, public question time. And I can inform you that no written questions have been received. So we now move to item 5, the May 2021 elections, which is an update on the arrangements for the May 2021 elections. Can I ask Andrew Oakley, Electoral Services Manager, to please provide the update to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. So we're now reaching the final stages of our planning for the May elections. We have purchased all the equipment that we need for COVID-safe polling at polling stations, We have nearly appointed to all the staffing roles that we've identified for the election. And we're now moving towards making sure we've got contingency staffing for the unavailability of key staff as we get closer to the election and in the days leading up to the election. We're writing to voters where there's a polling station change as agreed at last council. And that letter, it contains a postal vote application. So if voters decide that they prefer not to go to the polling station, they can complete an application and send that back in a reply paid envelope. And we're finalising arrangements for socially distanced count. There are two counts at these elections. There's the count that we're holding on the 7th of May, Friday, where we'll be counting the votes for Crawley Borough Council and West Sussex County Council, and then the count on Monday, the 10th of May, where we're counting the Police and Crime Commissioner election. We've designed a system where we think we can maintain social distancing between all staff and observers. This will require us using the whole of K2's sports hall, but we will at all times be able to maintain that 2 metre distancing. That planning work is ongoing, but we're optimistic that we can count the election within a reasonable time period on those days with staff that we need. Be slightly reduced staff to what we'd normally have at an election. So if there are any questions that members have about plan and share, I'll be very happy to answer them if I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. And can I begin by saying once again, you know, how grateful we all are to you and all of your staff for the work that you've done on this. You know, it's been a huge piece of work at a very difficult time for everybody, and I think we should put that on record. I'll now open the debate. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak, and you'll be brought in if there are any questions. Please unmute your microphone and check that you are live before making your comments, pausing for 3 seconds to allow for the time delay. Well, so far I'm not seeing any cameras going on. I will just give one more chance. If not, then all committee members have had the opportunities to speak. So I move that the committee note the update provided. Please indicate now if you are not in agreement that we note the update. Okay, thank you very much. That update has been noted, and as I say, I would like us to minute our thanks to Andrew and his team for all the work that they've done over this, because it's been a huge piece of work. Thank you very much. That takes us on to item 6, the future format of council meetings. Can I bring Chris Pedlow, Democratic Services Manager, in to please present the report to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go through the whole report, as I know all members would have read it, but I'll just point out a few bits. Firstly, the report before you is because of a request made to the Commission on the 1st of February, endorsed by the full Council on the 24th. Governance is asked to have a look at the future formats of Council meetings and to give an initial steer in what form they should be held, be it in person, virtually or hybrid form. That's both for internal and external meetings. The report also sets out that the current position is that from the 8th of May, the law will default back to how it was previously before the virtual meetings urgency. All committees will be held in person, and virtual meetings where members are via a computer link, if you like, will not be lawful. And currently, or based from the last information we received on Thursday, this still remains the case, and that the law will revert back on the 8th. Also, the report seeks to steer for members that should the law does change, what their initial view will be for the AGM, as this is the last governance meeting, and then subsequently next week's council meeting is the last meeting before the AGM. That AGM will be held during lockdown or some form of lockdown, as well as a number of other committees. So is what the members' view on the approach should the law change for those meetings. And finally, it's important to remember, obviously, we're running these meetings through Teams. Once the lockdown ends and the committees' rooms are available, our current town hall does not have the webcasting built into it, which we will do in the new town hall, which we'll be moving into next year. However, obviously, we can do Teams in the committee rooms, but it won't be a full hybrid like you would have during webcasting. So hopefully, Chair, that gives a bit of a flavour to the discussion and explains why the report's before you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. For practical reasons, I intend to hold one debate on the item and then to hold separate votes. The first vote will be in relation to recommendation 2.2a, i.e. which meetings should be held in person, virtually or in hybrid form going forward. We will then hold a vote on recommendation 2.2b, i.e. the format of the forthcoming AGM of the full council. Finally, a single vote will be taken together on recommendations 2.2c and d regarding reverting back to in-person meetings should the necessary legislation not be enacted to allow virtual meetings to continue, and the delegation to the monitoring officer to amend the constitution appropriately. Before I open the debate, I'm going to invite Councillor Lanza, as the OSC member who requested that this issue be brought before this committee, to speak first on the item. Councillor Lanza.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Chris Pedlow for presenting this report. I think it's clearly an important item to be discussing, though we're in a little bit of a state of limbo at the moment. I mean, you hear some statements that the government isn't intending to renew the enabling legislation for virtual meetings, but you don't know for sure, do you, until almost until the day. I mean, that's on the basis of recent experience. I just wanted to really outline some kind of instincts that I have about this. And if it is possible, if it does prove possible to resume virtual and hybrid meetings, and I don't think it's impossible. I just mentioned to you as an aside that even before COVID, it was enabled in Wales via the Welsh government. So it's not such an outlandish proposition. But if it does continue to be enabled, then I do think our public and our media will expect us to have learned something from the COVID crisis, and also expect us to show a lead by having at least some meetings as what I might call digital by default. In other words, an expectation, certainly in the case of many of the informal meetings, that they should be digital or virtual, unless there's a very good reason why that isn't the case. And in making that comment, I appreciate the reasoning for this can differ between, say, a borough or district council on a tight boundary and a county council. Clearly the travel distances for a county council are greater. But nonetheless, if there's an opportunity for elected members to show a lead and reduce their number of journeys into the town hall, I think that's something that should be seriously considered. There's another dimension to this as well, which is about inclusivity in local government, by which I mean enabling people who, for whatever reason, are unable to leave their home to participate in the representative democratic process. And further to that, although there is guidance for employers, for people who are in real employment, there's guidance for employers to support participation in local government. It is only that. I doubt that it's enforceable. And even if you did try to enforce it, I think it could have covert repercussions on your personal career prospects if you did. But if you introduce the prospect of someone in employment being able to join council meetings, and perhaps those that are still taking place during shift hours, while remaining at their workplace and using a room at their workplace, then I do think you've got the potential to encourage and enable a whole range of different people to stand for election as councillors, and I really believe that's very important. So I'm very ready to hear what others have to say, but my feeling right now is that when it comes to the informal meetings, by default, these should be digitally enabled, or at the very least enabled in hybrid form. And I take on board the comments that the hybrid capability might not be there until we have the new town hall. Then there's the kind of secondary question of what we do for the council AGM and the interim period. While it might be possible to hold that in the Hawth, I believe, it all depends, really, doesn't it, on the level of restrictions that are in play at that time. And I think if there's still a certain level of restrictions in there, I think it's slightly counterintuitive to hold the full council physically if there is enabling legislation in place to enable it to be held virtually. So those are really my initial views. That there's something about, just to be in summary, there's something about showing some kind of environmental leadership, reducing travel, but also about increasing inclusivity from the point of view of the people who can stand for election and be councillors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Lanza. I'll now open the debate. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak on this report, and you'll be brought in. And so far I have Councillor Crowe followed by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I do have quite a lot to say on this, and you might probably think that's unfortunate. But first of all, we are put in a situation. Look, we all know that the government, anyone that's reasonable knows that the government has got a lot on their plate at the moment. But notwithstanding that, it is very unhelpful that we haven't as yet been told that the current legislation will be extended, or indeed have new legislation that actually enables virtual meetings. And this is, quite frankly, at this stage, most unhelpful. I'm not going to shy away from that. My expectation is that I do think something will be enabled so that virtual meetings can continue. But until we have that confirmed, we are in this sort of no man's land where we need to plan for the scenario of having no legislation that enables us to have council meeting virtually, or assuming that it does come in, and then what to do going forward. Now, I don't personally think it's particularly helpful that we're actually having what you might call two discussions at the same time here. One is what to do about annual council and the first term of the new council between May and July, and then secondly, what to do longer term. And my view is that it's a bit too soon to take a longer term view. We're still in this pandemic. We're still in a national lockdown. We still don't know what legislation we will be, if any, we will be dealing with in the future. So I know OSC is independent and they can propose what they like, but personally, I don't think it's helpful having that longer term conversation at this time, but I do think it does need to be had at some point. So we've been asked for an initial steer. So if I go through the recommendations, I will give my view. So point A on what type of council meetings should in principle be held in person, virtually, or in hybrid form. Well, we've already heard that having hybrid form isn't realistically going to be doable for us at any sort of reasonable expense until we have the new town hall operational. So therefore, I think we ought to discount hybrid meetings for the time being until that facility is actually enabled. So then we're actually talking about whether to have virtual or in person, and for what type of meetings. So where I disagree with Councillor Lanza is where he said that non-formal meetings should be digital by default. I would say there should be flexibility to enable the choice of those people who are participating in those meetings, be it members or officers, to determine themselves what kind of format they use to hold those meetings, assuming that there are no COVID restrictions at that time, or indeed concerns, or sincere concerns about COVID. I don't think councillors overall should be dictating how a cabinet member has a one-to-one with an officer, for example. That should be the choice of that cabinet member and said officer, I would argue. But I do think it's right to differentiate between non-formal meetings and formal meetings. And my view at this stage is that formal meetings ought to be in person by default, unless there are reasons not to do so. And so that's my view on in the longer term, sort of completely post-COVID, if you like, on number A. On letter A. If I go to letter B on the recommendations about the council AGM, well, if no legislation is forthcoming, well, we are going to have it in person, which I think would be the wrong thing to do. I do expect some sort of legislation, and I do think we should give a steer that the annual council should be a virtual meeting. It would give us that certainty now. It would enable officers to plan for that meeting. And of course, we need to recognise that although we're hearing a lot of media reports about the vaccination programme speeding up, and it looks like this coming week we're going to get lots of extra doses, which is fantastic. There's every chance that we're not going to see the entire adult population certainly vaccinated by the end of May. And of course, it's not just being vaccinated, it's the full effectiveness of the vaccine as well, which I believe takes 2 to 3 weeks to actually kick in. So I would expect that there would be members of this council, albeit perhaps those under 30, who would not be vaccinated by the time of the annual council. And I think it's too soon to assume that we all will be. I think we need to err on the side of caution, provide that certainty, and to have the annual meeting virtually. I also think that if I move on to letter C, I should say, looking at the proposal here, should further legislation not be enacted, allowing the constitution that we have to go back to in-person meetings. Well, I think we have to, and we have to rescind the virtual procedure rules. We have to be compliant with the law, whether we like it or not. If we don't like a law, we should make representations accordingly, but we cannot act outside of it. So I think part C is a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest. I think we have to support it. On part D, I do think perhaps this wording could just be tidied up a little bit. I would take the view that the governance committee and then subsequently the full council, and of course we've got a full council coming up next week, should take a view at this time as to what to do for the next cycle of meetings. I don't think we can look any further ahead than that, but clearly we do need to provide clarity and certainty for members, for officers, and indeed the viewing public. So I would support a proposal where we give a steer each time for each upcoming cycle, and so that certainty and clarity is provided. And my steer this time would be, my view is that we should have virtual meetings going up until the full council meeting on the 14th of July. So I would take a view that we should go virtual up until that point. And of course, at that meeting, and indeed the preceding governance meeting, we should take a view for the first autumn cycle. So that, but I would also suggest that it is made explicit that if things were to deteriorate in the future in terms of the COVID pandemic, and we were meeting in person, that the monitoring officer should have the power to revert us back to virtual meetings in consultation with the group leaders. Because I do think we shouldn't have to go around the houses, so to speak, if there does need to be a change because of deteriorating situation, if there's a rise in infection. So I would like some clearer wording in Part D to make that sort of clear. Just say here, delegated authority to amend the constitution. So wishes expressed by the committee and full council, well, that's fine for the next cycle, but it doesn't allow for the case that if we are meeting in person, that we might need to revert back suddenly should there be a sudden spike in infections, either locally or nationally. So there are my views. I think I'll leave it there. I've had quite a good shout, and I look forward to listening to what other members have to say. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for that, Councillor Crowe. Before I bring other members in, could I also draw attention to the fact that there is a supplemental agenda sheet for this item. You'll see in the report there are several references to a list of formal and informal meetings attached as Appendix A. Unfortunately, that wasn't sent round with the main agenda, but it has been circulated as a supplementary agenda today. So hopefully people have got that. It does obviously make the distinction between formal and informal meetings. Can I now bring in Councillor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think this will be any surprise to anyone who knows my sort of IT background, but I've not had a problem with the virtual meetings, and I think it's been a good way to go. And I think whilst that opportunity exists to have virtual meetings, I think we should remain we need to stay in the same manner, if you like. So I know we're talking about the annual general meeting on the 28th of May. Now I have my jab on Saturday, and I'm not due for my second jab until the 29th of May. So and I won't, so the 50 plus band, if you like, are probably likely not to be protected by the time we have our AGM, and I think that's to be considered. I think obviously once the legislation changes, if we're not allowed to have virtual meetings, then they have to stop. But whilst the legislation allows it, and hopefully going forward, then I think that should be the digital by default for me. The only other thing I'd probably want to say is that obviously I appreciate that at this moment we're unable to have hybrid meetings and the cost would be inhibitive. So whilst I accept that there could be an interim period where we're forced back into meetings because we're not able to have hybrid meetings, I do think that soon as we go to the new town hall, then that option should be available to everyone. And for all the reasons that I mentioned, not just the environmental reasons of short drives into town or whatever, or sort of medium drives into the town hall, all these extra journeys that need to be made, but people's safety, people's inclusion for people who are unable to make the journey into town at the frequency we require. So that's my position. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Lamb next.
Thank you, Chair. I think my position is much the same as everyone else's. The AGM should be held virtually if we're allowed to. Meetings should continue virtually until such times it's safe to resume normal business, with people being sufficient immunity in the population that's unlikely to cause further outbreaks or contribute towards them. However, it would be nice in the future for us to have hybrid meetings when it is possible to do so. I think by default we move to still meeting in person. I suspect other people have found this, that there is something which is lost across an internet connection. It is far harder to manage a meeting, I've tended to find, in terms of actually getting the feel that you've had a proper, thorough debate rather than just a number of people talking at turn before a decision is suddenly taken. That's something which is much easier to facilitate when you can read people's body language in a meeting. However, for all the reasons that have already been said, in addition to the fact that actually we do have increasing numbers of people who work at the council. It used to be that way years back. It then kind of became largely more pensioner dominated, and it's moving back towards a working age population. And a lot of those people do work in London or commute from elsewhere, and the practical reality of getting back for a 6:30 meeting is often very challenging. So enabling people from all backgrounds and all occupations to participate in the workings of their council, I think, is quite an important thing. In addition to the fact this actually provides the online record of past meetings that I've wanted for some time, albeit that might be challenging to facilitate for a hybrid meeting, it is still a benefit, I would say, to have a permanent record that covers the things which were covered earlier in the meeting, that, where someone has said something, it is on record, even if it's not in the meeting minutes. So obviously with C, we have to go along with it if the law is changed, and we need some flexibility to enable rules to be brought back if needed. But I'd say we want to stay this way for as long as it's safe to do so, and it's legal to do so, and then have a hybrid system which enables people to dial in when necessary, but a default to still meeting face to face.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Malik now.
You're on mute, Councillor Malik.
My apologies. So it's more than 2 months before the AGM, and the way that things have been developing, I think it's a bit early for us to make a decision on this. Usually, I'm against the delegation of powers, but at this point, I would suggest that if it's not against the Constitution, we should delegate the power to the leader, the opposition leader, and the chief executive to make the decision nearer the AGM. So I think that would be the safest, I feel, option. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other cameras coming on, so before I invite anyone to to move something, I'm going to make a few comments myself, because it is an issue that obviously I've looked at in great detail over recent weeks, and something I feel quite strongly about. I have to say I'm personally not a fan of online meetings or virtual meetings. I think they've become a necessary evil in the last year as something we've had to do whilst we're in the COVID pandemic situation, and that will continue until such time as society is opened up and there are no longer any restrictions. But when that happens, I personally would like us to move back to in-person meetings, at least for formal meetings, because I think it is very important, and I'm pleased that Councillor Lamb made the comment about losing something with an internet connection and doing this over the internet, because I think you do. I don't think you have that same feeling of trying to get a consensus and actually, going back and forth to get to the optimal outcome of a meeting that you have when you're meeting in person. And I also think for full council and main committee meetings, our main public meetings, I think we lose something in terms of public engagement by doing it online. I know there's an argument that more people can sit and watch it at home than would perhaps come along to the town hall, and I accept that. But we do lose the in-person engagement, people coming along to full council to ask a public question, to make their point on something. And I mean, if you take, for example, planning committee meetings, I can remember a time when there was no public speaking at planning committee meetings, and members were unhappy about that, and therefore it was brought in, and we then had a system which we've had for a number of years now, where members of the public can come along, they can speak, they can say their piece, as can ward councillors on a particular planning application. We've lost that with the virtual meetings, because now they can put in a statement, but it's read out to the meeting, and the same goes for ward councillors. Now, that is something we have to do at the moment because we have no choice, but I wouldn't like us to be doing it on a permanent basis, and I think the public have lost out by not having that opportunity. So again, I would like, when the time comes, that we go back to the way things were run before in terms of public speaking and public rights to attend meetings and so on. And I mean, planning is a good example, because if you've got a strength of feeling about a particular application, people will come along in large numbers. They will pack the committee room out and they will make their comments, and that, you know, that's a form of lobbying that actually gets across to members what the local feeling is about. And that isn't the case if they're all watching individually on a Teams message in their own homes. So, you know, I do feel quite strongly about that, and I would like to see a situation where when things get back to normal after the COVID pandemic, that all those meetings listed on the left-hand side of that of the appendix, the public meetings, are held in person again, but can be enabled to be hybrid meetings as and when we move into the new town hall, because that then enables a member who is not able to attend in person for whatever reason to still take part. I also think, you know, you have to take into account the fact that things do go wrong. You know, both Councillor Lamb and myself found out at the OSC meeting last week that connections can drop out and you can have problems. And that, again, is a diminution of democracy and members' ability to actually do the job that we're elected to do. You know, I spent a lot of time reading the paperwork for last week's OSC meeting, formulating questions. And, you know, all the time I was trying to ask my questions, my connection was constantly dropping out. I didn't hear a lot of the answers. I had to ask them to be repeated, which obviously, you know, was an inconvenience for officers to have to repeat answers they'd already given, and you know, I thank them very much for their patience in doing that. But it really wasn't a very good experience, and didn't actually, you know, enable me to get the answers that I actually wanted to the questions I was posing. And I think those are issues that you have with virtual meetings that clearly you don't have in person. And you know, that is something that I would like us to get away from in terms of the public facing meetings. When it comes to the informal ones, I would agree very much with Councillor Flo. I think it's really got to be horses for courses. If you take, for example, cabinet member portfolio briefings or shadow cabinet member portfolio briefings, they are meetings which are attended by only one member and a number of officers. And they could take place in person or they could take place virtually. And I would take the view that actually it should be up to the individual cabinet member or shadow cabinet member to decide which format they want. Some will prefer a meeting in the round with a group of officers. Others will prefer to do it virtually, particularly those who work during the day and who may work away from Crawley and find it more convenient to do it that way. And that should be their choice. And of course, it doesn't have to be set in tablets of stone. You could have a cabinet member who normally has in-person meetings who says on one occasion they want it to be a virtual meeting, or vice versa. And you have that flexibility. So I would like to think that for those meetings, you know, and the same with cabinet briefing meetings in the round, that would be up to the cabinet to decide which they preferred. Working groups, I suppose, are in between. You know, personally, I would prefer them to be in person, but they could be virtually. And again, you could have a situation where each one decided by a majority what they preferred to do. So that's really my position. I suppose on recommendation A. In terms of B, the full council AGM, I think like other members, I have a bit of an issue with this, because we're being asked to make a decision on something that we don't know what the rules are going to be at the time. I mean, clearly, although it would be nice to have that meeting in person, given the fact that we will still be gradually coming out of lockdown at that point, it would make more sense to have it virtually. And I would be happy for us to plan to have it on a virtual basis. But the issue I have with that, of course, is that if the government doesn't change the rules, we're planning for something which we're not allowed to do. And therefore, we would have to have some sort of contingency plan, which would be the booking at the Horse, which I understand has been made. And whilst I appreciate people's concern about that, you know, I struggle to understand why it would be difficult to accommodate 36 of us in the maid auditorium at the Horse, when 12 days earlier it's apparently going to be okay for 20,000 people to go to Wembley Stadium for the FA Cup final. You know, I think there's a bit of a discrepancy there in terms of the dangers and the risks involved. So, you know, that is something we will need to look at. But I think it is something that's got to be kept flexible. And, you know, a suggestion was made that it be delegated to the group leaders to make a decision nearer the time, because clearly we're going to be in a situation where the rules may change, but what I don't want to see is a situation where we plan only for a virtual meeting, cancel the booking at the Hawth and have no fallback option, and then find that a virtual meeting is actually illegal and we can't do it because we really would have painted ourselves into a corner there. And similarly, I would again agree with Councillor Crowe about taking a view on a cycle by cycle basis. Probably, if we're allowed to have virtual meetings, we'll be doing that for the summer until the summer recess, which actually would probably be quite a good watershed. But again, if we're not allowed to do it, then we'll have to have in-person meetings, and we'll have to find a way to do it. And maybe the Charis Centre main hall may be the answer for committee meetings, because you could have socially distanced committee meetings there, which would be much better than in committee room B, where obviously you've got less space. In terms of the other recommendations, obviously, 2.2c is fairly straightforward. All I would say is that if we do rescind those rules, hopefully they could be suspended rather than rescinded, so that they're there to be brought back as and when they're necessary to bring them back, either if things get worse and we have to go back to virtual meetings as a result of the pandemic, or indeed, if the government changes the law and we can have virtual meetings on a permanent basis for some informal meetings, then those rules would be in place and they'd be ready to come in. And obviously 2.2d, Councillor Crowe has covered that in terms of the cycle by cycle basis. So really that's my position. I did see Councillor London with his camera on, but that seems to have gone off. Councillor London, did you still want to speak? No, he's shaking his head. Okay, right. In that case, I will ask Chris Pedlow if he wants to make any comments in response to those questions or comments that have been made by members. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there's any real questions asked. So those members have given their views and some potential changes to the recommendations. But the point of the report it was just to put the options there for members to decide. That's why there was 4 different recommendations. So there's nothing really for me to comment on, I don't think. I mean, members have made some suggestions. If they want to do that, they would have to move and second bits of or amendments, the recommendations. Thank you. I'll leave back to you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Lanza.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's been an interesting discussion, and I've certainly modified my initial view, but I kind of expected I might. Just to try and move things along, on recommendation 2.2a, can I test by moving that, in principle, the formal meetings should be held in person, and that informal meetings should be enabled in a hybrid form, so that people can join either in person or virtually, depending upon their circumstances. I think that kind of reflects what I heard.
Yes. Can I just clarify, Councillor Lanza? Are you including something about the portfolio briefings and shadow portfolio briefings that only involve one member? Because
I'm saying that it should be optional of the attendees of those meetings to be able to join virtually or in person, hence the use of the expression hybrid, but that the formal meetings by default should be in person.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, can I just ask, is anyone willing to second that? And I've got 2 members indicating. Right, well, I'll bring in Councillor Jones first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've listened to the discussion very carefully, but to a certain extent, I feel troubled about giving too strong an indication of what I'd favour, whilst it's unclear whether hybrid meetings will be a possibility at all. It just seems, I understand why people might want meetings in person. I also understand why we would. My understanding is that the County Council, for example, is going to allow scrutiny committee meetings to continue virtually because no actual decision is taken. Now, obviously, we're going to have to wait for the government to indicate what's going on, and it's quite clear as well they need to get their act together because this is causing a lot of uncertainty. But obviously, if anyone wants to indicate a preference, but my feeling is if we're talking about the future, we're talking about people working at home, you know, and working from home, then is there not a similar principle at stake here? I just put it out there.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I just clarify something on the comment Councillor Jones made about whether or not hybrid meetings are going to be possible or allowable? Can we just be clear, because Councillor Lanza's move is saying that informal meetings, briefings, working groups, etc., should be able to be enabled on a hybrid basis. My understanding is that there is nothing in the law that prevents that, because those are internal informal meetings which are not constituted publicly, which the public can't attend, and therefore we can basically do what we like with those. We can hold them in the way that we choose, and the only thing that's preventing us holding them in hybrid form is the technology, which we all know will be dealt with once we move into the new town hall. So, I mean, I don't think there's an issue with hybrid meetings when it comes to the informal ones. It's the formal meeting. But I personally, although I wanted to go back to in-person meetings for all the public committees and full council, and I've not heard anybody say that we shouldn't be doing that, I would also support enabling those in a hybrid manner if that can be done. You know, if there are one or two members who cannot attend in person, then we should be able to do that. But obviously, we would need legislation, and you know, who knows when that might come. I've got Councillor Lamb next.
Thank you. I think, you know, we're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, my understanding is everyone said that we ought to be continuing with virtual meetings for as long as it's safe to do so. Certainly, the AGM ought to be covered by that, and I think that is the thing which really we should be, I think, working our way back from. You know, in terms of what's going to be viable afterwards, I don't see the urgency as to why we should decide that today, given that we don't know what the rules are going to be. How about we just focus on trying to get through the current period with some understanding of what is going to be admissible, and then we discuss this the other side of the election when we've got a pretty clear idea as to what the rules are going to be. But the key thing for now is deciding that if we're going to have the ability to do it, that we're actually going to take the decision that the next AGM will be, at least the first tranche of meetings, virtual.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but the problem I have is that we could take that decision now and then find it's not permissible under the law if the regulations aren't extended. And I think that's why we need a fallback option, and probably we do need some form of delegation. Either to I would suggest group leaders in consultation with chair and vice chair of governance to make a decision nearer the time, because we don't actually know what situation we're going to be in. I've got Councillor McCarthy, then Councillor Crowe.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Mullins has come onto the call, so we need to do his declarations, please.
Oh, right. Okay.
Can I apologise, Chair? I was talking to somebody whose partner's just passed away, and it went out of my head. There was just some other things in there. So apologies for being so late, but I'm here now, and I don't have anything to declare.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm trying to remember who was next. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the hybrid meetings for informal meetings is a bit of a misnomer, because I think informal meetings were, like say, cabinet briefings and things like that, I think are likely to be could be virtual or physical. You know, that's purely optional. I doubt there'll be an occasion with groups of very small numbers where you'll have some of the group in a room sharing facilities and someone remoting into that room via a video call. So I think that's a bit of a red herring. And obviously, hybrid meetings for the formal meetings isn't possible because we haven't got them facilities, so we can't really discuss that. So whilst it's on the page, it's not really something we should get bogged down with. What we've really got are two options: either we're physical meetings or we have virtual meetings at this moment in time, until we go to the new town hall when we can have hybrid meetings should the law allow it. And I think we just need to be clear on that, so that we don't muddy the waters by keep mixing the hybrid meeting phrase in with the other options that are available. As I've said, I still think that digital by default and I think the AGM should be a digital meeting. It should be a virtual meeting, but I agree with you that we have to have a fallback plan should the law not support us doing that. When the current legislation runs out on the 7th of May. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Crowe next.
Thank you, Chairman. We are delving a little bit away from Part A in terms of the recommendations. So I just want to bring us back onto. I actually do agree with what Councillor Jones and Lamb were saying, but crucially, with what Councillor Lanza has proposed, which, by the way, I do formally second, despite the fact that I'm not, I don't entirely think he should have come here in the first place, and that's why I agree with Councillor Lamb. But with what Councillor Lanza has proposed, we don't need to know what the government legislation, if indeed there's going to be any, will be, unless they're going to, and it's unlikely they're going to say you could never meet in person again ever. That's very unlikely. So on the presumption that at some point in the future we will be able to meet in person, with what Councillor Lanza has proposed, we don't need any legislation as such. We don't need to know what it is. And it is an initial steer. So we're not completely wedded to this. It's an initial steer that in principle formal meetings ought to be in person. That's just an initial steer, and that informal meetings should be virtually enabled. I like Councillor Lanza's choice of language, because there's no, he listened to what I said. There is no compulsion to force anybody an informal meeting or private briefings or whatever to be in person or virtually. And I think on Part A, I think we can agree Councillor Lanza's move, because it doesn't affect anything else. And we can talk about, well, I think on Part B, I think we're all agreeing that the AGM should be virtual. So actually, I don't really think we've got much to disagree on at all if we sort of listen to what Councillor Lanza has proposed. So I would be very happy. Well, I'm formally seconding that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lamb, did you want to come back?
No, apologies. I just left my camera on.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Right. So I've got nobody else indicating to speak, and there is a move on the table. But can I, because we have gone round with a lot of detail, could I just ask Councillor Lanza just to outline exactly what he's proposing, so that everyone is clear on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm referring to the list of formal meetings and informal meetings as in Appendix A to our report this evening, which the Democratic Services Officer helpfully resent just now. So in the case of formal meetings, I'm proposing that in principle, they, going forward look, that they should be held in person, and that the meetings on the informal list should be digitally enabled. And of course, in moving that, I recognise that there's a caveat there, when possible. When possible, and i.e. around the capabilities within the new town hall. Of course, I recognise that. So all of this is kind of qualified on when these things are possible.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's proposed by Councillor Lanza and seconded by Councillor Crowe. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so we will now move to the vote. And Councillor Lanza has made that proposal. We'll now vote on the proposals that have just been moved and seconded. Can I ask the Democratic Services Manager to please conduct the recorded vote?
Thank you, Chair. On the Proposal moved, as you've stated, moved by Councillor Lanza, seconded by Councillor Crowe. Councillor Burrow, can you provide your vote, please?
4.
Councillor Crowe?
4.
Councillor Lead?
4.
Councillor Jones?
Against.
Councillor Lamb?
Against.
Councillor Lanza?
4.
Sorry, Councillor Lunnan?
Abstain.
Councillor Malik?
Against. Against, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy? Sorry, 1 second. Okay, Councillor McCarthy.
4.
And finally, Councillor Mullins.
Chair, Chris, can I say I need to abstain really because I missed the debate and it wouldn't be right in the circumstances for me to vote. So could I record an abstention on that basis?
Absolutely, that's a fine vote. 4. It's a leak. That's fine. Thank you. So, Chair, it's 5. The motion, the proposal from Councillor Lanza is carried. 5 votes for, 3 votes against, and 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We will now move to the second vote. Would any member wish to put forward a proposal for the preferred format in which the full council AGM should be held, dependent on any new legislation? Councillor Lamb.
Well, I'd like to propose that it's done virtually in the event of new legislation this year.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Yes, Councillor Crowe.
Yeah, formally second, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm assuming that is with the caveat that we would have to have a fallback option if that were not possible under current rules. Yeah. Okay. That's been proposed and seconded. We'll now vote on that proposal. Would the Democratic Services Manager please conduct the recorded vote?
Thank you, Chair. So it's voting that the AGM be virtual, if possible, or in under law. Councillor Burrow, the vote, please.
4.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Lead.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Lamb.
4.
Councillor Lanza.
4.
Councillor Lunnan.
4.
Councillor Malik.
4.
Councillor McCarthy.
4.
And finally, Councillor Mullins.
On the same basis as previously, because I missed the debate, I will abstain.
Thank you.
Okay.
Carried 9 votes to 0 with 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we move on to the other 2 votes, could I ask Chris if you could just clarify the position now we've agreed 2.2b. What would be the position if a virtual meeting were not possible in terms of the route to making a decision on how we proceed, given that we have no more governance committee meetings between now and the AGM? How would we do that?
It would. I mean, the way that the resolution, or what I read out for the resolution, is it's her position for the AGM is that it is a virtual meeting unless we cannot, and thus the constitution will be amended accordingly. So C in some ways is the key factor constitutionally. So you need to see recommendation C sort of does that, but in reverse. So you may want to accept it. And there was a move in saying could revert back also previously. So the constitutionally is there. It's fine.
Okay, so thank you. So can I suggest that we don't cancel the booking for the hall?
Yeah.
On the basis that we may need it, but we'll see nearer the time. Okay, I intend to take a single vote on recommendations 2.2C and D. Please indicate now if you're not in agreement with the single vote on that by turning on your camera.
That's fine, Chair.
Okay, no dissent has been indicated, so I'll proceed with the vote. We will be taking a recorded vote. I move recommendations 2.2C and D as set out in the report, and that these be put forward to the full council. Please note that this moves the recommendations to the vote and does not necessarily indicate my support nor that of the Vice Chair for the recommendations themselves. I will ask the Vice Chair to second, but before I do that, Councillor Crowe is indicating.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted, I did say earlier on that I did have a bit of concern about the wording in Part D, and also we haven't given a steer, as I can see yet, as to what to do for there's the cycle up until the July and full council meeting, which I would propose that we have that we say now that cycle ought to be virtual, although potentially I would be happy if things really did progress very well and the monitoring officer took a view that actually it is now completely safe for us all to meet in person, if we were to change that view in consultation with the group leaders. But I would just really like the wording in Part D to give a steer on the next cycle, because we haven't got another. We've got the annual council meeting, but I'm not sure that this would be the right form of business to discuss at that meeting. So therefore, the only alternative in terms of giving a steer or indeed completely forming a view is indeed this governance and the next full council meeting. So can you see where I'm getting at, Chairman?
Yes. Can I suggest you move an amendment to 2.2D then?
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I will. I propose perhaps after the word possible that we put the words in consultation with the group leaders. And of course, who knows? There could be more. There could be more than two groups after the elections. You never know. And also, and then there's a further sentence that says that the committee feels that, or the committee takes the view, or whatever we want to word it, the committee says that the next cycle of meetings up until the July full council meeting, I'd say perhaps up to and including the July full council meeting, should also be done virtually.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask, would you be happy to modify that slightly in consultation with group leaders and chair and vice chair of the governance committee?
Yes, that's fine, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a seconder for Councillor Crowe's proposal?
Yeah, I'll second that. Okay,
Councillor Lamb. Right. In that case, so we need to vote on the amendment first. Yeah. Okay, so this is voting on simply on the amendment to 2.2D. Can I ask the Democratic Services Manager to conduct the recorded vote?
Chair, voting on the amendment proposal of Councillor Crowe, Councillor Barrett, your vote, please.
4.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Eade.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Lamb.
4.
Councillor Lanza.
4.
Councillor Lunnon.
4.
Councillor Malik.
4.
Councillor McCarthy.
4.
Finally, Councillor Mullins.
I continue to abstain for the reasons stated.
Thank you. Chair, the amendment's been carried for recommendation D by 9 votes to 0 with 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'll continue with the original plan to take 1 vote on 2.2C and D if no one is objecting, and I will move those recommendations. Can I ask the Vice Chair to please second?
I formally second recommendation to C and D as amended.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask the Democratic Services Manager to conduct the recorded vote? And Chris, I think you were going to clarify some points.
Oh, sorry, you did say, or during the debate, and I just want to clarify, in section C, you said rescinded and reverted because of issues. Did you want that included? You can do that as part of it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's 50 seconds. I'll take it. I'll take it to the vote, Chair. So that's recommendation C and D as amended or as agreed amended. Councillor Barrett, for vote, please.
4.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor E.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Lamb.
4.
Councillor Lancer.
4.
Councillor Lund.
4.
Councillor Mallett.
4.
Councillor McCarthy.
4.
And finally, Councillor Mullins.
Continue to abstain.
Thank you. Chair, recommendation C and D as amended have been agreed by 9 votes to 0 with abstention.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think that's been a very interesting and useful debate. Obviously we have a number of resolutions that have come out of that. So thank you all very much for that. We will now move on to consideration of item 7, the review of provisions relating to call-in and urgency, which is set out in the agenda. And there's also been a supplemental sheet issued today, which will be explained as part of the presentation. So can I ask Ms Matthews, Democratic Services Officer, to please present the report to the committee?
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So the agenda sets out a decision which is being protected from call-in, as well as the reasons for that protection. Since publication of the agenda, an additional decision has been protected from call-in and was reported at last week's OSC and Cabinet meetings. As mentioned by the Chair, details of this further decision were published today in a supplementary agenda. In line with the Constitution, as the provisions for protection from call-in have been used this municipal year, this committee is asked to review those provisions. The committee is reminded that this is a review of the provisions relating to the protection of items from call-in and not a review of the call-in procedures themselves. Due to the circumstances surrounding the protections from call-in, which are outlined in the agenda and supplementary agenda, officers are of the opinion that it isn't necessary to change the provisions at this stage. However, should the committee be of a view that changes are necessary, any proposed changes will form a recommendation to the full council AGM. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll now open the debate. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak and you'll be brought in. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is a perennial item, I believe, that comes to governance committee. And I think what's crucial here is that the protection from call-in is used as sparingly as possible and is only used when it is absolutely necessary. And that continues to be the case. and the call-in procedure, well, I be quite honest, I can't remember when that was last used. It's certainly, I've certainly not called anything into full council myself, but for many years, if ever, quite frankly. So the fact that we do have to have these provisions, but they are used extremely sparingly and only for good reason. So therefore, I would propose that there is no change at this time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Crowe. I would agree with those comments. I think in terms of the call-in procedure, in terms of call-ins, I mean, my recollection is the power of call-in was used a lot between 2006 and 2014, but not a great deal since then. So I'm not seeing any other cameras coming on. Councillor Crowe has proposed no change. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor McCarthy. Oh, well, Councillor McCarthy just beat Councillor Lamb to that, I think.
Yeah, I'll second Duncan Crowe's proposal.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else's camera. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so we will move on to the voting. It's been moved by Councillor Crowe and seconded by Councillor McCarthy that no change to the provisions relating to call-in and urgency be made. Can I ask the Democratic Services Manager to carry out the vote?
Thank you, Chair. So we're voting on the no change to the call-in procedure be made. Councillor Barrett, your vote, please.
For.
Councillor Crowe. Sorry, the camera's gone. Councillor Crowe.
For.
Councillor Eade.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Lamb.
For.
Councillor Lanza.
For.
Councillor Lunnon. For. Councillor Malik.
For.
Councillor McCarthy.
For.
And finally, Councillor Mullins.
For.
Chair, that was unanimous. We changed the call-in procedure.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes item 7. Item 8, supplemental agenda. There is no supplementary agenda. I do, however, wish to formally request that a report relating to the LGA Model Code of Conduct for Councillors be brought before the next meeting of the Governance Committee in June for its consideration. I believe this is the most appropriate way forward, as the proposed LGA guidance on the code will have been issued by then, and because the new monitoring officer will also be in post by that point, and he may have some thoughts and advice to offer on the subject. So I hope everyone's happy with that. There was some discussion about whether we brought the report to this meeting, but given the fact the LGA guidance hadn't been issued at that point, and obviously we hadn't got the new monitoring officer in post, my feeling and the feeling of others was that it would be best to come to the June meeting. So I would simply like to make that request now. But other than that, no supplemental agenda, and with the business of the committee concluded, I close the meeting at 8:25. Is that right? Okay. Thank you very much for your attendance.